Mercy had always been the kind of girl who turned heads without trying. Her laughter was soft, like the sound of water trickling over smooth stones, and her eyes had that unexplainable spark that drew people in. She wasn't loud, she wasn't the life of the party, but she carried something else, an effortless grace that made people curious. Daniel noticed her long before she noticed him. It was during an ordinary Monday at Hillcrest High, their small-town school where news traveled faster than the morning wind. The classrooms were painted a dull cream, the chalkboards stained with years of lessons, and the corridors smelled faintly of dust and cheap floor polish. But when Mercy walked down those halls, Daniel swore the whole place brightened. He'd watch her from a distance at first, memorizing the way she placed her hand on her mouth when she laughed, or how her brow furrowed when she concentrated on her math problems. He didn't know how or when it happened, but Mercy became the highlight of his days. For weeks, his courage wavered. He'd greet her in passing, quick, awkward hellos, but nothing more. Until one day, fate threw him an opening. It was a hot afternoon, and the sun baked the dusty schoolyard in its relentless heat. Mercy was struggling to balance her textbooks as she walked out of the classroom. Daniel spotted her just as one of the books slipped from her arms. "Here, let me help you," he said, swooping down to catch the book before it hit the ground. She looked up at him and smiled, that dazzling smile that made Daniel's heart trip over itself. "Thanks," she said softly. "No problem," he replied, clutching the rescued book like a prize. "You, have a lot to carry." "End of term," she shrugged. "Teachers think we're machines." Daniel chuckled nervously. "Yeah, they do. Let me carry these for you." Before she could protest, he gathered the rest of her books. She hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Thanks. Daniel, right?" His heart soared. She knew his name. "Yeah," he said, trying to sound casual even as adrenaline rushed through him. "And you're Mercy?" "I am," she said with a playful smile, walking beside him. That was the beginning. From that day on, Daniel made it his mission to be wherever Mercy was, without being obvious, of course. He sat closer to her in class, volunteered to help during group projects, and walked her to the gate every afternoon. Slowly, she warmed up to him. His jokes, though corny, made her laugh. His quiet confidence made her feel safe. And soon, Mercy found herself looking for him too. By their final year, Daniel had become her constant. He was the boy who carried her books, who waited for her after school, who listened to her ramble about everything and nothing under the old jacaranda tree behind the science block. That tree became theirs, a place where time slowed down, where dreams felt possible. One afternoon, as purple blossoms drifted down like confetti, Daniel turned to her, his heart pounding. He'd rehearsed these words for weeks. "Mercy," he said, his voice almost trembling. "One day, I'm going to marry you." She looked at him, startled, then laughed softly. "Marry me? Daniel, we're still in school." "I know," he said quickly, his eyes locking onto hers. "But I'm serious. I'll work hard. I'll make something of myself. And when I do, I'll come for you." Mercy stared at him for a moment, then smiled. Gentle, almost sad. "You're sweet, Danny." "Say you believe me," he insisted. She sighed, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Fine, I believe you." And for Daniel, that was enough. They graduated with big dreams and bigger promises. Mercy imagined life beyond the sleepy little town, a life filled with lights, opportunities, and adventure. Daniel imagined Mercy, always Mercy, by his side. But life had its own plans. When the final bell rang and school days ended, Mercy's mother wasted no time. She had always dreamed of a better life for her daughter, and the city was the first step. Within weeks, Mercy's bags were packed. Daniel stood with her at the bus station the day she left. The old rusty buses groaned under the weight of passengers, and vendors shouting over each other, trying to sell snacks to travelers. But Daniel heard none of it. His world was shrinking to this one moment. "Don't forget me," he whispered, his hand gripping hers like it was the last lifeline in a storm. "How could I forget you?" she replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The engine roared, drowning out everything else. Daniel held her gaze until the bus disappeared down the dusty road, carrying his heart with it. City life was nothing like Mercy imagined. She moved into a cramped, two-room apartment with her mother on the outskirts of town. The noise never stopped. Honking cars, shouting vendors, blaring music from nearby bars. At first, it thrilled her, but weeks turned into months, and the reality sank in. Jobs weren't falling from the sky. Most days, she sat by the window, watching the world pass by, scrolling endlessly through her phone. Daniel called every day. His voice was warm, full of dreams that stretched far beyond their circumstances. "I'm coming soon," he'd say. "Just one more month, Mercy. I've saved enough. We'll be together again." And true to his word, a year later, Daniel arrived in the city. He stayed with his cousin in a one-bedroom apartment a few blocks from Mercy's place. They were together again, but it wasn't like before. The city had changed Mercy. Daniel was still the same, gentle, loving, devoted. But Mercy had tasted something else. She'd seen women her age posting pictures at fancy restaurants, flaunting new clothes, living the life she dreamed of. Meanwhile, she and Daniel were both jobless, surviving on handouts from family. Their dates were cheap fast food joints or long walks in overcrowded parks. Daniel didn't mind. He still looked at her like she was the center of his universe. But for Mercy, it wasn't enough. Not anymore. And then came Lawrence. They met at a small electronics shop downtown. Mercy had gone to fix her cracked phone screen. The shop smelled of new plastic and faint cologne. She stood at the counter, explaining the issue, when a voice beside her said, "You know, it might be cheaper to just buy a new phone." She turned. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp white shirt that looked expensive. His watch gleamed under the fluorescent lights. And his smile, oh, that smile, was pure confidence. "I'm just here to fix it," she said, suddenly aware of her worn-out handbag and faded dress. "I could help you with that," he replied, leaning casually against the counter. "What's your name?" "Mercy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mercy," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the name. "Beautiful name. I'm Lawrence." And just like that, a door opened. A door Mercy didn't even know she wanted to walk through until that moment. Lawrence was nothing like Daniel. He had money, he had class, he had that aura of a man who belonged to a world Mercy had only seen in pictures. When he asked for her number, she gave it without hesitation. When he sent her airtime that evening, her heart raced. The gifts started small: a bottle of perfume, a cute handbag, then bigger, a pair of shoes she'd been eyeing. Envelopes of cash slipped into her hand like secrets. Lawrence made her feel special, desired, and above all, taken care of. For the first time, Mercy tasted luxury, and she liked it. No, she craved it. Daniel noticed the change, of course. She grew distant, distracted. Phone calls became shorter. Plans to meet were often cancelled. When he asked what was wrong, she'd smile and say, "Nothing, Danny. Just tired." But when her phone buzzed with Lawrence's name, Mercy's pulse quickened in ways Daniel could no longer ignite. The night Lawrence took her to dinner, Mercy didn't tell Daniel where she was going. She wore her best dress, the one Daniel always said made her look like a queen. Lawrence drove her to a restaurant she had only seen on Instagram. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, waiters in black suits, food that looked like art. Mercy sat there, feeling like she'd stepped into another life, the life she always wanted. When Lawrence walked her to her door later that night, he pressed a kiss to her cheek and whispered, "You deserve this, Mercy, and more." Then he slipped an envelope into her hand. Mercy's fingers trembled as she closed the door behind her. Inside the envelope was more money than she'd ever held at once. She should have felt guilty. Instead, she felt alive. That night, lying in bed, Mercy stared at the ceiling, her heart torn in two directions. On one side was Daniel, steady, loyal, the boy who promised her forever under the jacaranda tree. On the other side was Lawrence. Wealth, excitement, the man who made her dreams feel real. She knew a storm was coming, and she wasn't sure which way the wind would blow. When Mercy said yes to Lawrence, it wasn't planned. It wasn't something she thought through with the weight it deserved. But then again, Mercy was only 21, young, wide-eyed, and chasing dreams she barely understood. Lawrence made everything feel like a fairy tale. From the first dinner date, he swept her off her feet in ways Daniel never could. Expensive gifts, late-night calls that stretched into the early hours, sweet words that made her blush even when no one was watching. And then, 3 weeks into their whirlwind romance, Mercy gave in completely. She told herself it was love. She told herself Lawrence was the man she had been waiting for, the one who would save her from a life of struggle. Daniel had waited, believing in something pure, but Mercy didn't want to wait anymore. Lawrence made her feel like she was already his, like nothing else in the world mattered. What she didn't expect, what she couldn't have imagined, was the result of that night. She missed her period, then another. The nausea came, then the cravings. At first, she told herself it was stress, but deep down, Mercy knew. She bought the test quietly, her hands trembling as she waited for the result. 2 bold pink lines. Mercy sat on the edge of her bed, the test clutched in her hand, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would burst out of her chest. She wasn't ready for this. Not now. She was barely an adult, with no job, no real plan, and a mother who still saw her as the little girl who left home for the city. The tears came first, then panic, then, strangely, relief when Lawrence answered her call with his usual calm confidence. "You're pregnant?" he repeated over the phone, his voice low, unreadable. "Yes," Mercy whispered, biting her lip. I'm sorry, Lawrence. I didn't mean—" "Mercy," he interrupted, his tone shifting suddenly. "This is the best news I've heard all year." Mercy froze. "What?" "I've always wanted a child," Lawrence said, his voice full of excitement now. "This is perfect. Don't worry about a thing, okay? You're mine, and now, so is this baby." She didn't know what to say. She had braced herself for anger, disappointment, even rejection. But not this. Lawrence was happy. Lawrence wanted this. The very next day, he sent for her. A car pulled up outside her mother's house, a sleek black vehicle that turned heads on their street. The neighbors whispered as Mercy climbed in, carrying nothing but a small bag. By nightfall, she was living in Lawrence's world, a world of glass tables, soft carpets, and lights that glowed like stars in every room. Lawrence treated her like a queen. He took her shopping for baby clothes, even though she was only a few months along. He bought her the best maternity wear, scheduled doctor's appointments, and held her hand through every visit. Mercy had never felt so cared for. He called her his queen. He kissed her swollen belly every night. He whispered promises about the future, about building a home for their little family. Daniel was a ghost by then, a name Mercy barely remembered, a voice she no longer answered. His calls came less and less, his texts turning from desperate to cold, and finally to silence. Mercy didn't look back. Why would she? She had everything she ever wanted: love, security, and a man who adored her, or so she thought. The first signs came in the third trimester. Small things at first. Lawrence coming home later than usual, his phone always face down, messages he ignored when she was in the room. Mercy told herself it was work. He was busy providing for them, after all. But then came the mood swings. One evening, she asked him why he hadn't answered her calls all day. Lawrence exploded. "Do you know how hard I work for you, for this child?" he snapped, his eyes cold in a way Mercy had never seen before. "The least you can do is give me peace when I walk through that door." Mercy was stunned. Lawrence had never raised his voice at her, not once. She apologized quickly, trying to calm him, but the damage was done. From then on, it was like living with two different men. One day, he was the loving partner who brought her flowers and rubbed her feet. The next, he was distant, irritable, disappearing for hours without explanation. And then came the woman. The first time Mercy saw her, she was in the living room, folding tiny baby clothes Lawrence had bought. The doorbell rang, and Mercy waddled over, her belly heavy and round. She opened the door to find a tall woman standing there, beautiful, sharp-eyed, with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here for Lawrence," the woman said coolly, brushing past Mercy without waiting for an invitation. Mercy stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" The woman turned, her eyes sweeping over Mercy's swollen stomach before narrowing in disdain. "His girlfriend," she said flatly. "Or at least I was, until he got bored and picked up this." She gestured toward Mercy's belly with a sneer. Mercy's heart lurched. "You need to leave," she said, her voice trembling, but firm. The woman stepped closer, her perfume heavy in the air. "Listen carefully, little girl," she hissed. "You think you've won? You think having his baby means you get to keep him? I've been here before you, and I'll be here after you, you and that thing in your stomach." She leaned in so close, Mercy could feel her breath. "I'll make sure it doesn't survive." Mercy stumbled back, clutching her belly protectively. "Stay away from me," she whispered. The woman laughed, a low, cold laugh that made Mercy's skin crawl. Then she turned on her heel and walked out as if she owned the place. When Lawrence came home that night, Mercy confronted him through tears. "Who is she? Why is she coming here?" Lawrence sighed, running a hand over his face. "Mercy, calm down. She's my ex. She's just bitter. Ignore her." "She threatened me," Mercy cried. She said the baby." Lawrence grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm, almost painful. "Nothing will happen to you or this baby," he said sharply. "Do you hear me? Nothing. I'll handle it." But as he walked away, Mercy caught something in his eyes, something she couldn't name. And for the first time since she met Lawrence, she felt truly afraid. That night, Mercy lay awake, her hand on her belly, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The man who had promised her the world was changing before her eyes. The home that once felt like a castle now felt like a cage, and somewhere in the back of her mind, a whisper of a memory surfaced. Daniel's voice under the jacaranda tree, promising to love her forever. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to silence it, but deep down, she knew. The fairy tale was cracking. and the worst was yet to come. Mercy sat by the window of her mother's house, staring at the tiny bundle in the crib. Her daughter, soft, pink, and innocent, slept peacefully, unaware of the storms outside her fragile world. The child's breath rose and fell in a rhythm that should have calmed Mercy, but instead, her chest tightened with fear and confusion. It had been 3 months since the C-section, 3 months since Lawrence carried her out of the hospital like a queen, promising her the world. For a while, it had felt real. He came with flowers every day, kissed her forehead gently, and told her she was the most beautiful woman alive, even with swollen feet and messy hair. But something had changed. He didn't call like before. When he visited, his hugs were stiff. The words, "I love you," sounded heavy, almost forced, like a sentence he was obligated to repeat. Mercy wondered if it was the baby. Maybe he didn't like babies. Or maybe it was her. Has the ex moved in? She asked herself countless times. That woman's words haunted her. "I'll make sure you swallow that baby." One Sunday afternoon, Lawrence arrived. Mercy's heart fluttered when she saw his car pull up, the silver sedan shining in the sun. For a moment, she thought things might go back to normal. "Hey, babe," he said as he entered the house. No hug, no kiss. He went straight to the baby, scooping her up with exaggerated excitement. "My princess," he beamed, spinning the baby gently in his arms. Mercy forced a smile, but her stomach churned. "Hi, Lawrence," she whispered, stepping closer. "You didn't call all week. I was worried." Lawrence put the baby down in the crib and turned to her, his face darkening. "Worried? About what?" You didn't pick up my calls," Mercy said softly. His jaw tightened. "Mercy, stop acting like my mother. I've been busy. You think I'm just sitting around doing nothing?" "No, I didn't mean—" "Then don't start." His voice sliced through her words. The baby started crying, sensing the tension. Lawrence bent to pick her up again, cooing as if nothing had happened. Mercy stood there, silent, 1,000 questions burning her tongue, but chained by fear. 2 weeks later, she packed her bags and returned to Lawrence's house. Her mother begged her to leave the baby behind until she settled. "I'll take care of her," her mother said, tears welling up. "Please, Mercy, don't take her into that chaos." Mercy nodded. Maybe it was for the best. She kissed her daughter 1,000 times before leaving. At first, Lawrence seemed happy to have her back. They laughed, cooked together, and even went out on a few dates. Mercy thought, maybe we're okay now. But the illusion shattered quickly. Lawrence came home late, sometimes at midnight, sometimes at dawn. The smell of perfume clung to his clothes. One night, Mercy gathered courage. When he stumbled in at 2 a.m., she stood by the doorway. "Where have you been?" she asked quietly. Lawrence froze, then turned slowly, his eyes blazing. "What did you just say?" I was worried," Mercy said, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, towering over her. "Worried? About me? Or about who I'm with?" "I didn't mean it like that." Before she could finish, his hand struck her face. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. Mercy staggered, clutching her cheek. "You ever question me again," Lawrence growled, "and I swear you'll regret it." Tears streamed down her face, but she stayed silent. Days turned into weeks. The violence escalated. If she asked where he'd been, he hit her. If she didn't ask, he hit her harder. "You don't care about me, huh?" he'd sneer, punching her ribs. "You think I'm a fool?" Sometimes he beat her until she blacked out. She'd wake up drenched in cold water, his face looming over her like a demon. "Get up," he'd bark, kicking her side. "You think you can sleep after disrespecting me?" Her body bore bruises in places she didn't know could hurt. But her spirit was shattering. One night, after a particularly brutal beating, Lawrence leaned close to her ear, his voice a chilling whisper. "You ever try to leave me, Mercy, I'll cut you into pieces, put you in the freezer, throw you away little by little. No one will ever find you." Mercy lay there, trembling, blood mixing with tears. For the first time, she believed him. The baby was now 3 years old, living happily with Mercy's mother. Mercy saw her occasionally, each visit like ripping open a wound. Lawrence never changed. If anything, he grew crueler. He had money, women, and power, but Mercy had nothing. Until one day, she broke. It was a Tuesday evening. Lawrence had been gone all weekend. Mercy sat in the living room, her body aching from last night's beating. When the door finally opened, she didn't move. Lawrence walked in, whistling, tossing his jacket on the couch. "Why are you sitting there like a ghost?" he mocked. Mercy stood slowly, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "I'm leaving, Lawrence." He stopped mid-step, then chuckled darkly. "Oh, really?" "Yes," she said, her eyes meeting his. "I can't do this anymore." For a moment, silence hung between them like a knife. Then Lawrence shrugged. "Good," he said coldly. "I've been telling you to leave." Mercy blinked. She expected rage, violence, threats, but instead, indifference, and somehow that hurt more than all the beatings. "Go ahead," Lawrence said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Door's right there. Don't let it hit you on the way out." Mercy stared at him, her heart pounding. She thought of her daughter. She thought of the girl she used to be, the girl who believed in love. And for the first time in years, she felt something close to hope. But Lawrence wasn't done. He turned to her, smirking. "You think you can just walk away from me, Mercy? You think it's that easy?" His voice dripped with menace. And in that moment, Mercy knew leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking out the door. Mercy stared at the message glowing on her phone screen, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through the words again. "No man will ever love you the way I did. We belong together, Mercy. Soulmates." She sighed, her chest tightening. After everything she had gone through, these words didn't make her feel loved. They felt suffocating. Daniel, the boy who once held her heart so tenderly, now sounded like a stranger trying to claw his way back into her life. Why now, she thought, tossing the phone on the couch. After all these years, after everything. Mercy got up and went to the tiny kitchen of her one-bedroom apartment. The cupboards were nearly empty, except for a packet of noodles and a tin of coffee. Life wasn't glamorous, but it was hers, free from Lawrence's fists and his cold, cruel words. Still, at night, when she closed her eyes, the memories crept in. The promises Lawrence made, the kisses that turned into bruises, the fear of not waking up after one of his beatings. And now, Daniel, the man she once thought would be her forever, was suddenly trying to write himself back into her story. Her phone buzzed again on the couch. She froze, her hands tightening around the mug she was about to fill with water. Slowly, she walked back and picked it up. Another message. "You can block me if you want, Mercy, but fate has a way of bringing what belongs together. You'll see." Mercy's heart raced. She stared at the words, the air in the room feeling heavier than before. Was this just heartbreak talking? Or was Daniel serious? For a moment, she considered calling her mother, but the thought of admitting everything, the abuse, the broken dreams, the shame, kept her silent. She couldn't go back home. Not now, not ever. Instead, she typed a quick response. "Daniel, please leave me alone. The past is the past." Before she could hit send, she paused, her thumb hovered over the screen, then moved back. Number responding would only feed him hope. With a deep breath, she blocked his number and dropped the phone on the couch again. Mercy walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. They flickered in the distance, like tiny stars, mocking her loneliness. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly alone. Not just without a man, but without anyone who really understood what she had endured. Then, in the silence of her apartment, a thought crept into her mind like an unwelcome guest. What if Daniel wasn't just talking? What if he really believed they belonged together? She shook her head, trying to push the thought away, but it lingered like smoke in a closed room. Behind her, the phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't Daniel, it was an unknown number. Her stomach tightened as she reached for it. She unlocked the screen and read the message. "You think you're free? You'll come back to me, Mercy. One way or another." Her breath hitched. There was no name, no clue, just those words. Mercy's fingers went cold as she stared at the screen. Was it Lawrence? Was it Daniel? Or someone else entirely? Her knees felt weak, and for the first time in years, she whispered a prayer under her breath. Because in that moment, one thing became clear. Her story wasn't over. It was only beginning. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this tale, remember to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey into our African stories. Until then, stay curious, stay kind,